Hello and welcome to the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. My name is Mark Hamilton, and this is the podcast that Mr. Daly didn't know we were recording until live during the recording of last Thursday's podcast when I kind of
Good times. Good times.
I was like, by the way, I need you to find some time on Sunday because I have a feeling there's going to be some news coming down the pipeline on Friday. And of course there was, but my friend, it is right now, as we sit here recording January 15th, we're halfway through January, which is crazy. How the heck are you? How was your weekend?
It's been a great weekend. It was my youngest son's birthday. It was NFL wild card weekend. Oh man, there was just so much good going on this weekend that it's going to be tough to go to work tomorrow. But hey, that's part of the daily grind. You got to go out there and earn your living. But at least I can say that the past couple of days have been a heck of a lot of fun. But how about you? I don't know how you're going to do this. You've got like, what, 4 days of work, and then you guys are off to TO on Friday to go and check out that Raptors game. Oh man, if that was me, like I just know I would have a lot of trouble focusing on basically everything between, wheels up and touchdown in Toronto. Go check out the game between the Raptors and the Celtics, and then, man, that's going to be cool. I'm very jealous.
I have a lot of trouble focusing, period. I have to keep the blinds closed in my office because if a butterfly goes by, my day is done, man. My day is done.
Yeah.
And the Toronto thing, man, like I've been to Toronto so many times, but I've never been there in the winter, and I'm not a cold weather city guy. So I'm trying to plan my wardrobe, and I'm like thinking like, okay, Nike dry fit t-shirt, OVO hoodie, and an OVO varsity jacket, and then a Canada Goose rain jacket on top of that. And then I went and bought Timberland boots today. I'm not a boots guy at all, so I'm kind of freaking out. And it's supposed to be dry and like -1 those days, but not a cold weather guy. So I'm trying to psychologically and physically get prepared to visit a cold weather city in the middle of January. Yeah, super pumped up. So we fly Friday, get to hang out there on Friday and Saturday, see the game Saturday night, and we fly back. And of course, the following weekend is the weekend that we long planned, which is a trip down to Portland. And for those that don't know, again, we're in Vancouver. So we're in the Pacific Northwest, an hour and a half, 2 hours north of Seattle, right on the US-Canada border. And Portland's about a 4 or 5 hour drive from us from there, just to kind of contextualize it. But we are officially part of the Pacific Northwest. But my friend, we've got some dates coming up fast, and I know we talked about these a couple of days ago, but those numbers just keep ticking down. As we sit here, we're 39 days away from F1 winter testing in Bahrain.
Yes.
We're 40 days away from Drive to Survive season 5, and 49 days away from the first Grand Prix of the season. And I added this as well because it ties into something we're going to talk about a little bit later, but 70 days away from the first MotoGP Grand Prix event. And the other thing that of course happened this weekend was the first Formula E race of 2023. Again, I throw a lot of shade at Formula E because I'm still mad at the FIA that I'm out $1,000 on tickets. But congratulations to Jake Dennis. He won the race from the UK, followed by former F1 driver Pascal Wehrlein, and Lucas de Grassi of Brazil finished third. My friend, and I think we've got some car launches coming up too, right?
We do. So what we have confirmed: Williams February 6th, AlphaTauri February 11th, McLaren February 13th, Aston Martin also launching on February 13th. So that's going to be a busy day. Ferrari on Valentine's Day, Feb 14th, Mercedes February 15th, and Alpine February 16th. So super busy, about a week or 10 days coming up. And well, just a couple of weeks from now, I was thinking, yeah, it's a month off considering today is the 15th, but then staring me right at the top of the list is Feb 6 for that Williams launch. So that's going to come up very quickly.
That Williams launch, and this is a tease, and you're going to have to listen to the rest of the podcast to find out why, but undoubtedly the car reveal I am officially most excited for is the Williams reveal. And I'm never excited about a Williams reveal. I'm crazy excited. But again, to find out why, you have to listen to the end of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Way to throw a tease in there like that right off the top. Good for you, man. We'll all learn eventually, right? Me probably last of all, but hey, I was always late to the party, so to speak. Okay, so this is kind of a cool stat that you picked up. I think this one's from Autosport, right?
Yeah.
And this is F1 car weight. So going back from 2007. So the F1 cars today weigh almost 200 kilograms more than they did in 2007. So if you want to get get that into pounds, multiply that by 2.2. So 605 kilograms back in 2007. And right now we are at 796 kilograms for 2023. And that's actually 2 kilograms lighter than they were last year, but there's some big jumps along the way here. So from 2007 to 2010, they went up 15 kilograms, or about 33 pounds, 34 pounds thereabouts. And then between 2010 and 2011, another 20. Then there was a big jump between 2013 and 2014, which you would expect, because that's when we transitioned into the V6 turbo hybrid era in 2014. So there's a 49 kilogram jump. So in 2014, the cars weighed in at 690 kgs. And then you get some little jumps and some bigger jumps. And then the next big jump was, again, beginning of last year, again, a transition into a new era of Formula One. So between 2021 and 2022, the cars increased by 46 kilograms, or about 100 pounds. So that's quite a bit. But this year, like I said, between 22 and 23, they've dropped about 2 kilos, or about 5 pounds. But that's quite a bit. 200 kilograms, about 450 pounds increase in a decade and a half, right? That is huge. That is, but I mean, there's that. I remember talking about it with you on the show, I guess maybe a year and a half ago. I remember somebody did a really cool graphic and kind of outlined, it was a graphic of like the different silhouettes of Formula One cars basically through the decades, and going right back to the 50s, the 60s, etc. Right. And then you had like today's cars, which would have been 2020 or 2021 at the time, whenever we talked about it. And they dwarfed everything else by comparison. But what I thought was really interesting was just the increase in size, which really, Leo, lends itself nicely to this conversation, because it was about that same time that I was looking back to those sort of like mid 2000s cars, like in size compared to the ones that they were running, a year and a half ago, whenever it was. And they look almost like they were dwarfed compared to the ones that we're running now. So to see that that brings up that memory, but then also to see like the weight as well, that's incredible. I mean, we talk about a sport where ounces literally can make a difference, and then we look at this 200 kilogram increase in a decade and a half. That really just blows my mind.
The difference between a 2007 car and a 2022 car, man, it's almost like they're two different racing disciplines. And
I know,
serious props to Lewis and Fernando Alonso, because I guess they're the last two standing from that 2007 era. Of course, I'm sure I forgot somebody. I'm going to get blasted forward on Twitter. But you look at those 2007 cars, man, they were probably similar width-wise, but length-wise, they were massively shorter. They weighed 200 kilograms left, which has huge implications for braking prowess and acceleration and being able to take the cars through the corner. And of course, as you add more weight, it has serious implications to tire degradation. And of course, in 2007, the roll hoops weren't as robust, and you didn't have a halo. And the way that the cars delivered power was far more linear. And of course, today, when you're talking about these 1.6 liter V6 turbo hybrid cars, the drivers have to be conscious about charging a battery and the power delivery, and talking about DRS. Like, it's a fundamentally different car, and it's amazing that these drivers are effectively able to adapt. And of course, for Lewis, it's not like he took a 14-year sabbatical from 2007 until 2023, but the reality is these cars are vastly different. And if you look at somebody like Lewis, he was been able to win consistently in all of these different eras. And of course, hopefully Fernando's going to have a really successful year this year. And I think we'd love nothing more to see him back on the podium. But yeah, car weight tells a lot as you start to unpack why the cars are heavier. It's an interesting history over the last 15 years for sure.
100%. Now, talking about Fernando, that transitions nicely into the next stat that we have. And this one comes courtesy of motorsport.com. So most DNFs in the turbo hybrid era. So let's say, just for the sake of it, 20 races a year multiplied by 8 years. Let's say 160 races, maybe 175 if we've been over 20. So since 2014, the driver with the most DNFs is none other than the double world champion from 2005 and 2006 himself, Mr. Fernando Alonso. He weighs in at 40 DNFs. that's like basically a season and a half in modern Formula One calendar length of DNFs. That's a mind blower. They're probably mostly all came with McLaren. Then Roman Grosjean, 35. Carlos Sainz, this was a bit of a surprise, 33. Max Verstappen, the world's champion, 31. That really made me sit up. Nico Hulkenberg and Danny Ricciardo have 29. K-Mag has 28. Marcus Ericsson, who's now racing in Indy, has 24. Sebastian Vettel, the four-time world champ, is 23. Danny Kvyat, alas, no longer racing in Formula One, has 22. Kimi Räikkönen, the Iceman, also has 22. And last but not least, one of the more maligned drivers, I think, is fair to describe it, is Lance Stroll. He has 22. And Lance has been in the sport now since, what, 2017? That's a long time, but anyways, that's quite the eye-opening statistic there. So very, very cool. Okay, Hammy, let's transition into the listener emails now. We got quite a few to talk about. So thank you to all of you that dropped us a line this week. First one comes from Juan Solo on Twitter, and Juan has to say, "Hey guys, just wanted to say I'm still enjoying the podcast." That's cool because we're still enjoying making it. So it kind of works both ways, but appreciate the love. Anyways, I've reduced my social media interaction. It's trying to limit the family screen time as well as just my own. The interview series episodes have exceeded my expectations. Looking forward to some good ones this year. Some things I'd like to hear you guys tackle this year. Sorry if it's presumptuous to make suggestions. I think you're doing really an amazing job. Number one, a bit more tech info, maybe like an intro to tech, what the rules are, who to follow, perhaps a guest who could explain stuff simply. Number two, what I'm looking for more than anything else, some info on other series, perhaps a series of poker episodes about other series, like a primer for WEC, WRC, Formula E, NASCAR, MotoGP, etc. What are the rules? How do the points work? What's a race weekend like? The growth of F1 should help the other series increase their viewership as well. That's a great point, actually. Three, a sim racing episode. You may have done it as part of an episode and I missed it. From the F1 game to iRacing, using controllers to $10,000 rigs, which I'd love to have. I think that would be amazing. What's the best option for each price point? I know there's stuff on YouTube, but I trust you guys more. Love the podcast and the community seems to be growing. I love that the community you've fostered is healthy, accepting, non-confrontational, which we do as well. So that's awesome. You're doing great work, and I look forward to your podcast every week. There's so much competition for you now. I really just want to see you continue to grow and succeed. And I hate that you won a trip to Toronto and Raptors tickets. Some guys have all the luck. Yes, I agree, Hammy. It's just not fair. You should be taking us with you, but I know the seats are limited on the Hamilton private jet to the center of the universe. So finally, just Juan wraps up. Sorry this was so long. Really just wanted to thank you for the good times I've had listening on longer commutes and for your honest opinions. Keep up the amazing work. Okay, so quite a few things there. So number one was the a bit more tech info. Rules, good follows, a guest that could maybe break it down into an intro. So how do you respond to that one? I've got a couple of names that kind of pop to mind, but go ahead.
Let me take a stab at a couple of these. So this was a really good message to get from a really great listener, and kind of kicked me in the ass a little bit on a couple of these topics because there's some things that I've been meaning to do. One, I actually had a conversation with Bryson Sullivan, who now has the hugely popular Tech Heads podcast as well, which is a very, very good show about very technical F1 subject matter. He's been on our show a couple of times, which has been amazing. First time in late 2021. I think this was the first time he'd ever come on a podcast.
Yeah.
Again,
Bryson's way too smart for at least for me, and I feel intimidated. But anyways,
me too. But Bryson had volunteered to come on the show again. So if you've got some ideas about what you'd like us to talk about with them, I'm all ears. And then we did our Power Units 101 last August, which was really well received. And that was always intended to be part of a multi-part series. So in fact, right before the show, I was talking to Charbel, and we're working on a date for Power Units 102. I still have a bunch of great listener questions that we're going to tee up for that. And also, as part of this, I was at a children's birthday party earlier today, and I was looking at this email. And one of the things I've always wanted to do as well is a MotoGP 101. And I ended up reaching out to Ed Spencer because he's a big MotoGP guy, and he said I'm in, but he gave me a recommendation of somebody else we should bring with us for that series. So I reached out to a wonderful young lady named Maddie Patterson, who is not an F1, a MotoGP reporter. So the three of us are going to jump on and do a MotoGP 101 primer show in February in the hopes of maybe converting some F1 fans over to MotoGP. And then in terms of the sim racing episode, I hear you loud and clear. This is one of the things we probably get requests on more than anything else. I don't necessarily know who to talk to because neither you and I are super familiar with the rigs. We haven't built them ourselves. I wouldn't even know where to start. But if anyone has a recommendation on somebody that you think would be a really great guest to come on and talk about starting your own rig and brands and tools and software, I think I would certainly be receptive to that.
Can I make an admission right here? If I had like a 10 grand to drop on something like that, I think I'd go for the full flight sim. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me, but I've always had like this fascination with like fighter jets and things like that. But it'd be a tough call, right? I mean, I don't have 10 large to drop on something like that, so I guess it's kind of a little bit easy to say, well, I'd love to.
Pegged you wrong. I assume you would have been a train simulator guy. Get that $50,000 train simulator going in your basement. Running that CP rail train down through canyons of Arizona. Yeah.
No, I'm going Top Gun all the way, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that was a great one. So thank you, Juan. And yeah, definitely a lot of things coming up. I've got some ideas too, but I just switched jobs here a couple of weeks ago. So as my schedule kind of finds a little bit of equilibrium and I find out, what some good times for me are, then I want to jump into this too, because it's something I wouldn't have been wanting to explore more. Okay, cool. Moving on. Kylie, email from Denver. Hey guys, love the show. You talk so much about F1 media, what a poor job they do. But if you had the opportunity to write for the sport at the BBC or ESPN, what topics would you cover? Keep up the great work. So I'm not sure if we're being put on blast or we're
I don't know. We're being asked. So Kylie, thank you. I don't know how to take this one, but the fact that you're listening and you reach out is awesome. So I think for me, I talk about this all the time, but the first thing that I'm doing, somebody hands me some money, some time, a platform to get my workout. I got to dig into that 29 Ferrari. And I think you and I could probably do this collaboratively, but let us go and dig into that 2019 secretive FIA with Ferrari. That to me is one of the biggest scandals of all scandals. I would start there. And then I think more recently, I think I would really want to start getting into Formula One sponsorship and crypto. And just the fact that so many of the teams in the sport itself were seduced purely by money without doing any meaningful due diligence to partner with some really questionable sponsors. And I think that could probably extend to just sponsors in general. Obviously Rich Energy, although Alanis and Elizabeth have done a fantastic piece of work on that. But we talk about the fact that, and I always forget the name of the company, but you always remind me of Mercedes. And of course they partnered with that construction firm in the UK that was very closely implicated in a massive building fire that cost the lives of dozens of people. Like, I think that's the kind of stuff. So I think for me, sponsorships, and I want to get to the bottom of that Ferrari scandal for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I think those are great because those are ones that they kind of pop up. They sort of percolate up to the top of the F1 newsfeed, and before you know, they've disappeared like dust in the wind, right? So I'd love to be able to do stuff like that. But for me, and this is maybe not so relevant to like modern Formula One, but I'd love to do more about like the names and the personalities of like Formula One from years gone by. We talk about Rush occasionally on the show, that the movie about the 1976 Formula One World Championship between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, and what a great movie that was. That came out, was that 2015? 2013, that's right. Yeah, so I mean, it's been out for almost a decade now. And just to sort of dive into like and I know that it's been done, but by other people, but it's something I would find quite enjoyable. And then also maybe like the Formula One versions of like Rick Steves and like travel and stuff like that. Travel to like different Formula One destinations, all the different cool things that you can do like in conjunction with a Formula One trip. That would be kind of cool. But I'd love to. the one thing I do love is really good investigative reporting on any subject. It doesn't matter what it is. So that would be, I think, like you, that would be the top of my list. But there definitely are some kind of like cool ones as well. Cool. Well, thanks for that one, Kylie. Moving on to Jamal from Detroit, checking in by email. Hey, Mark Squared. Thanks for reading my email on the show. I've listened to every episode of your show since you two synced up in 2020. Have you considered doing a series of introductory podcasts to other racing series? I remember many years ago that Shift F1 did some awesome episodes introducing other series, including NASCAR, that were fun and fascinating. I think you guys would do an awesome job of this. Love the show. Peace. Well, thank you for that awesome email, Jamal. So did you want to add to anything? Because you kind of like addressed it a little bit in the first email that we read off as well. So
not a lot to add, Jamal. Thanks for the email. And specifically, I actually remember that Shift F1 episode they did on NASCAR, and I probably learned more about NASCAR than I'd ever known before that. And I was actually intent on watching a NASCAR race after that, which I never actually did. But I know exactly what you're speaking to, and I think give Mark and I some more time. And this is the kind of wizardry I think we would love to spin up.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll start with MotoGP though.
Yeah, well, you're the expert on MotoGP, so start where we got a little bit of background in it, and then kind of sort of wade into other topics or other series after that. Cool. Finally, Trisha from Phoenix is checking in via email as well. The best upgrade to the podcast in the last year was Mark Hamilton. I'm just kidding. Trisha didn't say. I know that was a trick question just to see if you're paying attention, but you were a really good upgrade to the show, I must admit. And I don't say that with anyone twisting my arm. I mean that honestly. Anyways, the best upgrade to the podcast in the last year has been your new intro music. Who is it and where can I find it? Keep up the good work. So before you give away who the artist is, that actually comes via our good friend Micah at DJ Vinyl Richie on Twitter. And that, Micah has to have the coolest Twitter handle. I like one of the cooler ones that I know. But anyways, you should tell the story because it was really the work that you did with Micah to put this one together.
I can't even remember how I broached the subject or how it came up with Micah, but I was just speaking to the fact that I think we've been slowly going through this incremental updating process of the show's branding, and the music was one of the first things that we did. And of course, we built originally a great relationship with Micah's brother, and I think he got Micah into F1, and he and I have been chatting for a while. But he's big. He's in a band. He's big in the music industry, and he was a big part of helping JT the Human bring to life one or multiple of his albums. And JT the Human is a really great hip hop artist. And the song specifically is called Are You With Me or Nah? And you can find it on Spotify or Apple Music. On Spotify, he's a verified artist, so it should come up really, really quickly. But the cut that we have, that 30-second cut, was actually custom crafted from the song using the original, and I can't remember the specific music terminology, but they went back to the source, the master files, and actually pieced together the 30-second intro that we have. So that was custom crafted out of a really great track just for the show, and I cannot help Micah enough for that. So thanks so much, man.
Yeah, it certainly was a massive upgrade compared to like the $10 stock music kind of placeholder intro music that we had until we got something a little bit more bespoke. And I love it because every time we jump into the studio off that the intro music there, just it puts me in the right headspace, gets me pumped up like every single time. So that was I'm still so grateful and impressed you were able to put that one together. And a big shout out to Micah and JT the Human for that, because it is an amazing track. Okay, well, that looks like a good place and timely as well to jump into a quick break. And when we come back on the flip side, we've got a lot of F1 news to cover, including a bit of a sad and troubling one. And we'll do that in just a moment. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show for a Sunday drop, a bit of a rare news show on a Sunday. But like you said on Thursday night, Hammy, that this is the off season that just seems to give on giving. It seems like it's been oddly busy the entire, well, I mean, except over the holiday break there between Christmas and New Year's was kind of quiet. But other than that, the news just seems to be coming most days. There's something of note. But this first one here is really, really sad sad to hear. And this comes from Jenny Gao. Jenny is a well-known Formula One reporter, and she's done a lot of stuff for the BBC and the Checkered Flag podcast, etc. And she had a post here the other day that just said, "Hi everyone, been quiet the last few weeks. This is because I've suffered a serious stroke. My husband is helping me type this as I find it hard to write and my speech is most affected. I am desperate to make a full recovery and return to work, but that may take some time. Thank you to the medical teams at Frimley and St. George's and my family and friends who've got me through the last fortnight." Well, that is a really, really bad bit of news, and of course, I think it goes obviously without saying that we've got Jenny in our hearts, hoping that she's going to make a full and quick recovery, because she's a young person, and to hear that from anybody at any age is just really, really sad. And this one really kind of knocked me back when you shared that with me the other day, Mark. It was just you don't expect bad news at any time, but especially when it comes to somebody who's in the prime of their life, right?
People ask me all the time, Mark, what F1 podcast do you listen to? And reliably, consistently, the one F1 podcast that I listen to every single time it drops is the Checkered Flag podcast. And a
Yes.
big
Yep.
reason for that
Yep.
is just
Is
the
Jenny.
presence of
Yeah.
Jenny, and just
Yeah.
the energy and the charisma and the presence that she has on that podcast. And whenever she's on a broadcast is just so impactful that yeah, this is shocking and sad, and I feel horrendous for her and her family, and obviously sending out my best wishes, and I hope she has a full recovery. But she will be missed because she is just such a part of the community. And I think
Mhm.
you and I can sit here, and we've been critical of so many people that are in the paddock walking around with their microphones and their role and what they contribute to the F1 ecosystem. And Jenny is just one of the superstars, and this is heartbreaking. So, like you, wishing her and her family nothing the best, and hoping she has a speedy recovery.
Yeah, absolutely, and hope that, like you say, it's quick, speedy, and she's back to 100% really, really soon. Okay, well, let's talk about the happier, more positive things. So this next story comes courtesy of Formula1.com, and these are 10 rule changes that you need to know about for the 2023 Formula One season. So we'll talk about a couple of them here. So just going down the list, ride height and diffusers are adjusted, stronger roll hoops after Zhou Guanyu's crash, a reduction in the minimum car weight, which we talked about a little bit earlier, so 2 kilograms lighter this year, revised mirrors to improve driver visibility, double the number of sprint events, paddock working hours cut, qualifying format and DR trials, tweaks around gearbox changes, a move to clear penalty confusion, and more flexibility to cool fuel. So there's quite a lot of things that are being changed and tweaked for this year. Which one do you want to jump into first, Hammy?
I want to talk about number 7 qualifying format and DRS trials, because
Yep.
this is something you and I talked about probably 6 ago. And I like this idea, this concept that they're going to be trialing at a couple of events this year, because as much as I love the technical, complex, strategic part of F1, I've never loved the tire strategy and the usage implementation rules for qualifying. But I'm going to read this here from Formula1.com, that article that you were shared with me. But it says
Mm-hmm.
a revised qualifying format, RQF, will take place at up to 2 events in 2023 for the purpose of evaluating whether the revisions are suitable for subsequent championships as per the updated regulations. This will see tire compounds mandated for each stage of F1's usual 3-part qualifying sessions. Hard tires for Q1. So every car in Q1 will start on hard tires. Any cars that go to Q2 will run on medium tires. And finally, any cars that reach the Q3 session will run on soft tires. Intermediates and wets will be allowed if the RQF sessions are declared wet. And finally, at RQF events, each driver may use no more than 11 sets of dry weather tires, 4 sets of intermediate tires, and 3 sets of wet weather tires. This compares to the normal weekend allowance of 13 sets of dry weather tires, 4 sets of intermediate tires, and 3 sets of wet weather tires. But basically, the takeout here is that probably 2 events this year, we're going to have a qualifying session where Q1, all cars will be rocking the hards. Q2, everyone will be rocking mediums. And Q3, everyone will be rocking the softs. So I like this. I'm eager to see how it plays out, but I'm curious to
Mm-hmm.
see what you say.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, we've talked about it before, just the possible changes to the qualifying format, and we've kind of looked down our noses at that failed attempt several years ago. That kind of that rolling cutoff that just
Yeah,
never worked.
yeah.
It was doomed right from the beginning, and I've always thought that even though that this format might not be perfect, it's been a lot better than some of the other suggestions that we've seen out there. But I like this idea of having the different compound tires for the different qualifying sessions. So it'll be really interesting to see how it turns out. But I think it's kind of interesting too that this RQF will take place at up to two events. So it's kind of like they're leaving it open that if they try to, a still to be determined race weekend and it completely goes pear shaped, that they have the option right off the bat. Is like, yeah, maybe we don't want to try this again at Coda or Japan or Brazil or wherever they're thinking of doing it. Right, that if it's just a disaster right from the very first weekend, they can just kind of just to kind of do a bit of a Jedi mind trick and pretend it never happened. But I do, all joking aside, I do give them props for trying this, because there seems to be a little bit more thought put into this one. Not that there wasn't with that rolling cutoff thing, but it just that just seemed very, very clumsy. I think this is interesting, and the other thing is cool too is that it'll probably give the teams a little bit more data for the tires as well, because it's funny too, because you see at times say, well, the hard tires and expected to be of any use this season, or sorry, in this race, and then somebody throws a set of hard tires on, for example, and then goes and lights up the lap time. So it'll be interesting too to see all the compounds during like that qualifying session, and just the deltas between them, because I love that graphic that we see at the beginning of a Grand Prix or a qualifying session, and say, well, these are the hot, soft, medium, and hard compounds for the race. It doesn't really matter if it's a C1, C2, C3s, but just the deltas between them is just like, this is what you're going to get in the softs, and it's going to be half a second faster than the mediums. They're going to be 3/4 of a second faster than the hards. So it'll be actually kind of cool to see that in real time, especially for guys like Lewis or Max or whoever that are going to get through an entire qualifying session unless something unusual happens, right?
Daily, the other one that I want to ask you about, because you and I have talked a lot about this over the last, I guess, 2 years. We've been rocking the sprint events. Of course, we did 3 events in 2021 coming out of the pandemic, shortened
Six coming
2020.
this year.
Last year we did 3, although Liberty FOM desperately wanted 6, and the FIA shut that down. Hey, we don't have the resources. We're not ready to go. And I think that ruffled some feathers. But to your point, we're doing 6 of them this year. And I started on an absolute high, and I came down, went up a little bit, came down. But then I reflect back on the most recent sprint event in Brazil. And of course, that was the one that George took. And of course, he won a Grand Prix that weekend by being able to build on that. And I'm like, maybe I'm a little warmer on the sprint events. I don't know that I'm super excited about 6, and maybe I shouldn't have to be. I don't know, man. Like, you are like me, you consume a lot of F1. We're 2 years almost, well, I guess we're heading our 3rd year of this concept. Where are you? What headspace are you in when you hear sprint races?
Oh, I'm in exactly the same place as you are, Hammy, because I was like, just like you 2 years ago, like when we were sitting down, I was, hey, yeah, sprint races, they're finally going to happen. And, right out of the chute, it was just like, yeah, this isn't really what I was kind of hoping, but we'll just kind of like move on. We'll see it again. And then we saw it a couple, and then we've seen it more since then. It's just kind of like, I've kind of ebbed and flowed in a little bit, but I've kind of landed the same place. If, each of one of them, or as often as possible, was like Brazil last year, that would be fantastic, because that really delivered everything, and it really made for an exciting race weekend from start to finish. And I guess it all is really dependent on the track. And I know that there's cynical me and maybe logical me. Cynical me is like, oh, 6 sprint races means more money in the pocket of everybody that can profit from Formula One. But I'm kind of hoping that with the selection of the tracks that is going to have like a sprint race this year, I'm hoping it's going to give a large enough sample to look ahead to beyond 2023 and say, okay, these are the tracks that we know it's going to be good at, because Brazil was awesome. And if we could have 5 other weekends like Brazil, then that would be a real treat. Then it really becomes like appointment watching, right? Because otherwise it'd be like, oh man, it's a sprint race weekend. I don't really want to sit down. Like, I'll go and watch it, but I'm not really super pumped to. But if I don't, then I know I'm going to be kind of missing part of the story. So I don't like being in that space. I just, I need more of a reason to get excited about it. And like I say, if we get more Brazils, then I'm definitely all for it.
Cool. Anything else on this list that piques your interest or that you wanted to touch on?
Well, I guess the other one too was a move to clear up the penalty confusion. This was
Good
number
call.
9
Good
on
call.
Formula1.com's list, because there was just so much of it last year. And so I'll just read the entire 2 paragraphs. So I'll start here. Quote, grid penalties came under the spotlight at last year's Italian Grand Prix, where a host of drivers took power unit and gearbox related drops and turned the order on its head. Following some confusion over how these were applied, the wording of the regulations has been updated. The relevant section now reads, quote, classified drivers who've accrued more than 15 cumulative grid position penalties, or have been penalized to start at the back of the grid will start behind any other classified driver. The relative position will be determined in accordance with their qualifying classification. So, end quote. So we'll see how that works, but I'm glad that they're doing something about it, because I wouldn't say that it made a mockery of things, but it was pretty close to it. It just had a real kind of bush league feel about it. It's like, hey, this is supposed to be the pinnacle of global motorsport, and these penalties and how they're applied and just the optics just looked it didn't look great. So I'm glad that they've decided to do something about it. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one. And this is dialing back to something that you and I talked about. Ooh, it's been quite a while. It might be even about this time last year. So this was the whole thing of like paid subscriptions for add-on features and so we're getting away from Formula One, but to some of these premium features that you can get in a car. So at the time we were talking about BMW, and it was for things like the remote engine start. So you're basically unlocking features that would be basically behind a paywall. So they've decided to stick with this. They've doubled down on these paid subscriptions in the USA. So if you want a BMW and you have things like the remote engine start, they're going to charge you $105 per year to be able to access these premium features. I'm just like, half of me's like, well, if you've got the coin to buy a BMW, then what's another $105 per year? But at the same time, it's like, if I'm buying a luxury car like a BMW or a Mercedes or a Lexus or whatever, shouldn't all of these features already be included? It's just like, I just find it a bit of a I don't know, maybe sleazy's going too far, but it just does not sit well with me, this one.
This is the reason I added this to the podcast, by the way, is because you and I talked about a topic very similar to this. Probably, yeah, you're right. Probably maybe even a year ago. And I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was because in the US, BMW was looking to put front seat heating behind a subscription.
Yes, that's it. Yep.
Infuriating about the concept of cars and subscriptions to unlock functionality is when you pay for these cars, you are paying for that hardware. You own it. It is physically in your car.
Yep.
But they're forcing you to pay these subscriptions or additional one-time fees to unlock the capabilities. And this article here from carscoop.com indicates that in Australia, for example, on many BMWs, front seat heating, steering wheel heating, parking assistant professional, real-time traffic information, adaptive M suspension, BMW driver recorder, remote engine start, Apple CarPlay, and USB map update are available through subscriptions. When you buy your fully loaded BMW, you may have to subscribe to 9 different subscriptions to unlock the functionality in your car, which is just the most mind-blowing thing in the world. Like, I get memberships, I get subscriptions, like, makes total sense when I go to Costco and I get my annual subscription. I know what I'm getting. And it makes total sense when I enroll in Disney Plus every year for whatever huge amount it's going to be in the next couple of months. But when I buy a car and I own the hardware, how dare you put it behind a paywall? And unfortunately, BMW received fortunately, BMW received some backlash when this was announced last year.
Hmm.
But to your point, the word you said right off the top is they're doubling down. They're all in that this is the future. And the only reason they would be doing this is if consumers have been receptive to it, which is just kind of unfortunate because it sets a really bad precedent. Because if it works in the luxury market, you know damn well it's going to trickle down into the types of vehicles that you and I buy, our
Yeah, you,
Maybachs and such.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's a different level than say, like if you buy a new car and you don't want to spend the money to get like a Sirius XM radio app. The thing is, you can still listen to terrestrial radio. You can still listen to AM and FM radio, although I
Yeah.
can't remember the last time I did. But the thing is that audio player in the car isn't useless, you know. I mean, I stream everything off of my phone. I mean, as soon as I jump in, it connects to the Bluetooth. I'm listening to podcasts, I'm music, whatever, you know, whatever it is, right? Whatever I feel like listening to. But the thing is, and you know, I have Sirius radio in my car and I love it. But the thing is that if I didn't have it, I could still, you know, I could still use other, you know, there's still other options to use that audio player. So it's not like it's just this, you know, stupid thing. I can hit the power button and nothing happens. Whereas, I go to try and turn on the seat, my X5 or something, because it's a cold day and I need to heat my derriere. It's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
$105. Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it. But not that I'm one for frivolous lawsuits, but I'm kind of hoping that somewhere somebody's pouring through these, because like you say, the stuff's already in the car. So are you gonna, reduce the cost of the price of the car if I decide not to opt into, the bum warmers or the premium, other features like the remote start and
Yeah.
whatever else it is? I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure that, if it's 75 grand for whatever it is, it's 75 grand. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me. So I hope that some clever lawyering happens, because I don't know. I think that as usual, it's the consumers that get kind of stiffed, but you know, uh, if there's receptivity to it in the market, is like, really, honestly, come on, guys. Anywho, let's take another quick break here, Mark. We'll come back on the other side. Still plenty of things to talk about. We were talking about maybe getting gouged in the pocket here for people like you and me, but it's not the only place it's happening. And we'll talk about it in just a moment. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show indeed. So, we did briefly talk about this the other night, but Formula One teams are still pushing for this huge, gigantic, massive hike to up to $200 million for new race hosting fees for new entrants, new venues that want to host a Formula One race. This is absolutely mind blowing. What was it? We've talked about it before, because we had you found a list there last year. I remember looking. I think it was like venues like Saudi, and I think it was like Azerbaijan. They were paying what, about 50, 60, maybe mid 60 million ish
Yeah.
dollar for the race hosting fees. But I mean, this is pretty much quadrupling that. I mean, that's a massive, massive, well, tripling it at least. But I mean, wow, huge, huge.
Yeah, the race.com, the article here is really about, and again, I think our listeners are going to get a little bit tired about this, but it's the push to increase the effectively the anti-dilution or the expansion fee for new teams. And the reason why this race.com article kind of struck a chord with me is we know that Liberty is not particularly interested in allowing a team to sign up based on this $200 million anti-dilution fee. And we know the team sure as hell aren't, because they're ultimately the ones that prosper from the anti-dilution fee, because they slice it up evenly amongst themselves to kind of calm their nerves in terms of the potential threat of losing some of the prize money. But one of the things that made a lot of sense to me here is recent Concord agreement, which is effectively what binds the FIA and the teams and Liberty FOM all together into an agreement, which is the championship ultimately, is that the most recent Concord agreement was signed in 2020 and it runs from 2021 to 2025. That is the document that calls out the anti-dilution fee, the expansion fee. And it occurred to me the teams are probably going to work, and FOM are probably going to work to keep kicking this topic down the road far enough that they can negotiate into the new Concord agreement that will go live in 2026, that massively expanded anti-dilution fee. So the reality is the teams are cool on this, and Liberty's cool on this, and the FIA, seemingly on its own accord, has gone out and done this expressions or interests of expression or expressions of interest process. But I think the teams and FOM, if left to their devices, are fully intent on letting this existing Concord agreement run out so they can bake in a significantly higher expansion fee in the 2026 document. And I know it might seem like it's a long way away, but really after this year, there's only 2 years left in this agreement. They'll probably start negotiating the next Concord agreement in 2024. They'll probably have to sign it by mid 2025, so it's ready to go live for 2026. They may not even want to entertain the topic of expansion until that new agreement's in place. So again, we talk about Andretti and the fact that they had this opportunity with Sauber and they couldn't bring the capital together to do it. And this might also be one of the reasons why Andretti feels the desperate need to get his bid and his expansion bid in place and locked and loaded and agreed to, because he probably anticipates and knows that the teams are going to line up a six, seven, $800 million expansion fee in the 2026 Concord agreement. And I don't think there's any chance that he and his backers are going to be able to make that happen. And I don't know that there's necessarily a ton of people out there that could, although we're starting to hear more and more that maybe there are. But yeah, the story here really is the teams and FOM may just kick this subject far enough down the road that the existing Concord agreement runs out and it gets baked into the 2026 document.
Yeah, you're right. Like I mistakenly set up the top here for new venues wanting to host a race, but you're right. It is the new teams. But I mean, what would it be like for Formula One? I think is trying to position themselves as one of the premier sporting leagues, series, whatever you want to call it, in the entire world. What would be like the expansion fee for the new NBA franchise? Do we have
4
any
billion.
idea on the
Yeah, so it's pretty seriously. So it's the NHL, which is the example that keeps coming up. The
yeah.
Las Vegas Knights went for $500 million a couple of years ago, and Seattle, who was the 32nd team that came in a couple of years after Vegas,
Yep.
went for 650. The NHL is not a fair comp to the NBA because their national TV deals are so much smaller, but it's readily understood that when the NBA looks to expand after the next CBA and TV deals locked and loaded, that they're going to look at $4 billion for Vegas and $4.5 billion for Seattle, at least if you listen to Bill Simmons, and I think he's got some insiders, but that maybe contextualizes it. And again, I think if there was an NFL team, an NFL expansion team up today, and again, that league's already pretty rich in terms of team count, but I don't think there would be any doubt that an NFL team would go for less than $6 or $7 billion.
Yeah, you would have to think so, because I mean the NFL still kind of like stands out on its own a little bit, but I really find it just maybe on a bit of a tangent here, just the way that the stock in the NBA has really risen, because I mean the NBA has always been popular. I mean basketball has always been a popular sport, but it just maybe you can enlighten me and maybe perhaps some of our listeners too, just how much that the value of these NBA franchises have like increased in the time scale, because for me it seems like it seems like it's accelerated in a fairly short amount of like a short time frame. Is this, am I correct in that observation?
And there's nobody that's a bigger, no pun intended, but there's really nobody that's a bigger cheerleader for the NBA than I am. And they've been hugely, they've been the chief beneficiaries of some pretty significant TV money over the course of their last couple of TV deals. And I think when you look at professional sports, at least in North America, the single most important thing to those sports are their national TV deals. That's what pumps the vast majority of operating income into those sports. And when it comes to TV money, the NFL is absolute king. And that makes sense because NFL TV numbers are monstrous. In the NBA, people consume the sport, but they consume it through regional sports networks and streaming and piracy and social media and all these different ways. And the NBA TV deals are good, but they're good not necessarily because of the viewership, but simply because live TV, broadcast TV is otherwise dying. That the only way these TV networks are basically staying afloat is by getting their getting their claws into live sports. So the NFL's really, sorry, the NBA's really benefited by the fact that it's had some really pumped up TV contracts recently. And again, the current TV deals are going to lapse soon, and the NBA is going to be looking at some TV deals that could possibly be in the 50, 60, 70, 75 billion dollar range. And I
Wow.
think that's what's really helping to stimulate these values. But I get the NFL team valuations. The NBA ones seem a little bit rich, but then again, it's one of those things where there's only 30 NBA teams in the world, there's only 32 NFL teams, and it's a pretty exclusive club to be a part of. And if you're a billionaire, it's a really cool flex to own a professional sports team.
Yeah, you know what is also interesting is just family and friends that live internationally, how much more up to date they seem to be on the NBA compared to other American leagues. Like I'll always get like a lot of
Yeah, NBA
conversation with.
global reach is huge.
It's huge because like usually like the only time like I talk with family and friends living internationally for the most part when it comes to the NFL is in around the Super Bowl, right? Maybe a week
Great call.
either
Great
side of it,
call.
but I get messages and I'm not like I don't get enough time to watch as much NBA as I'd like to. It's not a sport. It's a sport I wish I could consume more of, but I keep up enough to be able to kind of converse on a very very the 30,000 foot level, at least know what's going on. But I get messages from family and friends all the time. I'm just like, wow, it constantly impresses me how people are up to date with it. Okay, well, let's move on to the next bit of news, and this is a fairly big one. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about the somewhat sudden decision at Williams to part ways with their team principal and was it sporting or technical director. And anyways, Yosuke Capito was team principal there for the past couple of years. He was out. That was one of those things. They just decided not to renew his contract by the end of end of last year, so December 31st. Anyways, they've announced that James Voles is going to be the new team principal. He's going to join the team on February 20th, just before the first Grand Prix of the year in Bahrain. He's going to be only the third team principal in history after the aforementioned Jos Capito and Frank Williams, who was founder and team principal forever. Kind of strange that Claire didn't get at least a mention
Yeah,
as co-team principal.
oh,
And
I
this
feel
comes from
bad.
and this is from the Williams official website. Anyways, James is only 43 years old. He has been a key player in Mercedes, helping score 9 constructors Formula One World Championships, over 120 race victories. And that is just an absolutely mind-blowing stat. So he's leveling up from the Mercedes Motorsport Strategy Director, which he's been in that position for the past 4 seasons. He's been in Formula One for over 20 years. And this is pretty big. He's been with Mercedes since 2010, since that team launched. But I get a bit of a different vibe because the connection between people at that level at Williams and Mercedes isn't anything new. We've seen that before with Paddy Lowe after the end of 2016, 2015, and that obviously just didn't work out, and they've kind of been on the decline ever since. But I get a bit of a different vibe about this one with James going to the team. I feel a lot more positive. I mean, he's a proven winner, and Patty did a good job, an exceptional job at Mercedes, but I feel like he's a step above Patty Lowe. I think this is a great move for Williams. What do you think, Hammy?
This is a massive deal. Couple of thoughts right off the top is one, this one came out of nowhere, which just reinforces how leak proof that Mercedes machine is. Because I think if this was any other team on the grid, we probably would have been talking about this for weeks or maybe months in advance. And then the other piece here too is the fact that typically when we see a transition of people capital like this from team to team, there's some gardening leave associated with it. In this case,
Mm-hmm.
there's none. James has been given the green light by Mercedes to get straight to work with Williams. And I think this is a great move. And I think a big part of this is going to be culture. And I probably 2 years ago with you oversold Yost. I thought he was going to come into that team, and I thought he was going to implement some great culture changes and break down some of the silos in which the teams operated under that Grove factory roof. But ultimately, I think this is a great move because if nothing else, James, he's 43. He's been in the sport for more than 20 years. He's an engineer. He studied computer science. He's been involved with one of the most successful teams in the history of Formula One. And he comes over and he understands culture and he can rebuild the culture from the inside out, because all he needs to do is mirror what was happening in Brackley up the road. And number two, he's also an incredibly intelligent person who was able to watch the growth and the metamorphosis of the Honda team to Braun and into Mercedes. So he knows how to build the team from the ground up. I think the questions are really going to be that, obviously with Mercedes, financial resources were never a question, and those financial resources were always available. And of course, now we operate in a cost cap era, which will probably be helpful in his pursuit of turning Williams into a successful Formula One racing team. But I think the key is, what is Dorilton going to be willing to invest in this team? And I know that Yost was eventually hoping to do a fairly significant revamp or redevelopment of the Williams campus in Grove and effectively rebuild much of the structures there. And maybe he wasn't as successful, but I think having been to Grove and walking that campus and being those buildings 20 years ago, it would have been pretty cutting edge for Formula One. But when you look at what teams like Aston Martin are doing, it's quickly becoming a pretty dated facility. All of that to say, I think James is an absolutely epic pickup. And I think if he didn't go here, he was going to go somewhere, because I think his development was effectively capped at Mercedes, because the next step for him was a team principal role. And you have Toto Wolff there. And maybe eventually he takes that 360-degree route and he's successful at Williams and he's able to find his way back to Mercedes. The other consideration here too is that strategically, tactically, this also makes sense, because it's important that Williams, who have tried to show some degree of autonomy. I struggle with that word, autonomy, over the last couple of years, is at the end of the day still a Mercedes customer team, and there's a technical relationship between the two of them. But again, I think this is a perfect marriage. I think James is going to be hugely successful there, especially if Dorilton or the future owners of that Williams team are willing to invest in that campus and invest in the people capital that are going to be necessary to take this team to the next level.
Yeah, it is a great pickup, but part of me still can't help but wonder that was there ever anything to Capito and historical links that he had with Volkswagen and Williams and Dorilton, and at the time when there was a lot of noise, it's juicy. I mean, it's just purely speculation on my behalf, but I know it's one of those unanswered questions. We had that that question earlier. It's just like, if you could report about anything in Formula One.
Smart, yeah.
This would be one of them. It's just like these sort of like unanswered ones where it's fun to talk about these things, right? It's fun to speculate. It's just like what goes on behind the curtain that we don't get to see. It's just like, is that just was there anything to it? Is it just like you and I idly speculating? But it is fun to talk about, right?
That's another perfect example where Jost Capito, with great fanfare, goes to Grove, goes to Williams. 2 years later, he's out, and there's just no questions. Like, oh yeah, he's gone. Like, but why? What happened? What went wrong? Like, why is nobody asking those questions?
Well, because number one, Volkswagen, that was rumored to be looking for an entry into Formula One, is not going to be coming into Formula One, but Audi is, and any other like those brands under the Volkswagen umbrella. It's Porsche that still gets kind of like tossed around. They're under that umbrella, aren't they? I think they are. Anyways, I get a little bit confused, but yeah, I don't know. There's probably nothing to it, but it is certainly fun to talk about. But yeah, just getting back to Williams again. This is a team that is, it's I just find it such a sad story because, historically, they were so good in the 80s and the 90s, even into the early 2000s. They were there or thereabout. But, when you go back to think that this is a team that hasn't won a race in a decade, and the last driver to win a race for them was Pastor Maldonado, who won in Spain in 2012. That's a decade ago, and that was a bit of a fluke win. It just kind of like blows my mind that it's been that long. But on top of that, it was just like how quickly they really kind of fell off of the precipice, because even back 5-6 years ago, I mean, in the mid-teens, they were still good for top 10 finishes, and there was an occasional podium here and there. I mean, they had a pretty decent lineup of Valtteri Bottas and Felipe Massa, and then Massa kind of retired, but then didn't. You kind of like the driver equivalent of Honda leaving the sport, but didn't. That's a different story. But then it just they kind of just really fell off the precipice there, and they were at the back of the grid, and instead of being able to have experienced or good drivers like Valtteri and Felipe in their car, they're going for younger, unproven drivers, and it was just kind of sad to see. I mean, they were just not like a little bit off the pace; they were massively off the pace. And then DeRilton comes into the picture a couple of years ago, and I must admit I had some mixed emotions about that, because there was a bit of a romanticism to it, right? Because they were the last privateers on the grid. This is a team that Frank started, like literally in his garage, and built it into world champion. And I mean, there's some iconic drivers that have raced for Williams and won races and championships and things like that. So anyways, at the end of the
Love
day,
it.
really hope that James Voles is the person that they're looking for, that he can turn it around. But like you say, culture is such an important part of it, right? I mean, I think we've all probably been in that situation, or many of us have, that we've worked at a job. It might have been like an awesome job, and we couldn't wait to get started. And you get there, and just corporately, it's just like this black hole of negative energy. And and that's an extreme example, but maybe at Williams it was just dysfunctional. Just like you say, maybe it's not only the factory and the facilities are a little bit dated now, but maybe the procedures and the way that they operate need an upgrade as well. And anyways, whatever it is, James certainly has his work cut out for him, and certainly wish him the best of luck. But much like Andreas Seidel and the McLaren situation, I like how that there's this no enforced extended gardening leave, that basically he can tidy everything up and put a bow on it, so to speak, and go from a Mercedes to Williams and get started, very much like Zach Brown let Andreas Seidel walk away and go over to Audi to start his new position there. Because that gardening leave thing, I mean, for people here in North America, I mean, that's something that's completely foreign, and just I find it a bit bizarre. But anyways, glad to see it didn't take effect in this case. Anyways, just looking at my notes here. Oh, yes, this is a big one. I was almost going to breeze right over it, and then you would have scowled at me, and rightly so. Anyways, just to wrap up the James Voles thing, the appointment at Williams, Mercedes tweeted, quote, James has been a key part of the team over the past decade, playing an integral role in our success in recent years. We are delighted that he will take the next step in his career, end quote. But the next big piece of news is that Gulf Oil is teasing a return to Formula One. Hammy, you take this one, because I know you're really excited to talk about this one, so I
I'm
don't want to steal
so
your
I'm so
thunder.
pumped about this one. So a couple of days ago, almost immediately after we posted the last episode, Gulf Oil International, who I don't follow on Twitter, but it got retweeted 1,000 times, posted the following: big F1 news coming soon, emoji eyeballs. And then what are you most looking forward to in the new season? So of course, immediately news erupted that this was going to be a kind of repatriation. That's totally the wrong word, but it was going to be a a renewed partnership between Gulf Oil and McLaren. And of course, back in 2021, McLaren rocked that absolutely stunning Gulf Oil livery at
Yes.
Monaco that we all
Beautiful,
fawned over, and
beautiful.
the merch sold like crazy. But it's not McLaren. And by all accounts, the McLaren Gulf Oil partnership has formally ended. And it is formally ended because it is now heavily rumored, and hopefully we'll be able to confirm this on our Friday show, but it is heavily rumored that they are going to partner with a new team on the Formula One grid. And that team happens to be Williams. So this could be epic because, of course, Williams has really struggled to find a lead title sponsor in the past few years. It relied heavily on sponsorship dollars that came through their partnership, of course, with Nicholas Latifi, Safina Foods, and RBC. All of those sponsors, of course, have now exited, but it is rumored that Gulf Oil will be the new title sponsor or a significant partner with Williams. And this is the reason why I was very excited at the top of the show to speak to the February 6th car reveal that will be coming
Mm-hmm.
from Grove. So it's interesting. James is going to arrive. They're going to have this new major partner, and this new major partner is going to have significant influence on what the design of the car is going to look like. So again, none of this has been confirmed, but it is heavily, heavily rumored. It's been reported on SI.com, Racing News 365, and a number of different sites. But this could be very cool because if you haven't seen the previous Gulf Oil liveries that adorned the McLarens, make sure you go Google and check it out. But the other reason why this is very, very cool story is presumably when you partner with a major international oil company, you're going to be able to secure the bag, as they would say on the street. You are going to secure the bag. And that is the money that James is going to need to update and modernize those facilities and continue to bring in great people to support the development of that car. So again, this isn't confirmed. Hopefully we'll be able to confirm it on our Friday show. But if the news is true, I'm excited, man. You were a huge fan of that McLaren livery. Your eyes popped out of your head when I mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. What do you think about a possible partnership between Gulf Oil and Williams?
It's beautiful, right? Because I mean, this is a real old school, like that McLaren livery that you're talking about is a real old school throwback. This goes back to like the late 1960s and the Ford GT40, which in of itself is one of the most beautiful race cars ever designed and built, in my opinion. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But as you were talking here, I just Googled it and I found this article on thetruthaboutcars.com, and there is an article written here by a fellow by the name of Ronnie Schreiber. Said an original Gulf livery car, 1968-1969 Le Mans winning Ford GT40. So it's quite a long article here, and there's some gorgeous pictures of this powder blue GT40 with the nose has got this sort of burnt orange on it with the burnt orange stripe, and then sort of like a black border between the two colors, the big Gulf logo on the nose, and then the old school number with the white circle with the black 6 in the middle is just absolutely gorgeous. But the actual article, like I say, is actually fairly lengthy, but there's one paragraph here that I'll read. It says, quote, the original Ford GT40 that wore Gulf corporate colors was raced by Gulf VP Grady Davis. The original race car painted in Gulf Oil colors was a Ford GT40, a chassis that was raced at Daytona and Sebring in 1967 as an independent entry by Gulf Oil Executive Vice President Grady Davis. It carried Gulf's corporate colors of dark blue and orange. In 1967, for the upcoming Commission's Sport of International, the sporting arm of the FIA, reduced allowable engine displacement in the Group 6 prototype endurance cars to 3 liters. That meant that the car that won Le Mans in 1967, a Ford GT40 Mark a Mark IV, with its 7-liter 427 cubic inch engine, would not be able to defend its title. Having won at Le Mans 2 years running, Henry Ford II had nothing else to prove and shuttered their endurance racing effort. John Wyer, who had an important role in the development of the GT40, realized that the platform could compete at Le Mans as a Group 4 sports car, so JW Automotive Engineering took over the management of the team and arranged for a sponsorship from Gulf Oil, renaming the cars Mirages. The 3 Mirages were built and they were painted the now familiar powder blue, not Gulf's indigo. The colors were specified by Davis, who thought the lighter color was more exciting. Gulf had earlier acquired the Wilshire Oil Company of California, whose corporate colors were powder blue and orange, and Davis wanted to use those colors. He may have been onto something. The lighter blue and that shade of orange are considered equiluminant colors. The human eye has a hard time perceiving the edges of objects when the colors and their background colors have similar luminance. That makes the edge seem to vibrate, which gave this particular color combination a lot of visual pop. The visual livery actually includes a dark blue hairline border around the orange, which reduces the optical illusion and any visual discomfort while maintaining the most of the visual impact, end quote. So yeah, go check it out, thetruthAboutCars.com, and just Google that up. But yeah, actually, like that's dark blue because it's interesting in the picture. It looks like it's black, but just stunning, stunning stuff. And if we could see something similar on the Williams, like that, we saw that just that one-off livery on the McLaren. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's just one of those. I see that and I just think classic racing. It has a place in sport, in motorsport. Just like I was so glad to see McLaren bring back the papaya. It's been a little bit diluted in over the last year or so with the addition of other sponsors, but that still is the main. The papaya and the black is still the main thing. Colors on the McLaren. That's a throwback to the 1970s and the the genesis of that team started by Bruce McLaren in Formula One and Can-Am, and just I think things like that are just really cool. There's a really neat vibe about cars and racing from that period. But Hammy, I don't know, you're gonna have to pick your jaw off the floor, my friend. I mean, I know this is really really fun stuff to look at, but we do have one more thing to talk about before we turn off the lights and call it a night here, and that's just regarding the upcoming 2026 engine rules that are supposedly going to level the playing field for new OEMs. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, just a great story here from Luke Smith from motorsport.com. And I'll read here and I quote: F1 will overhaul the regulations for its V6 hybrid power units in 2026, placing a greater emphasis on electric power and sustainable fuels as part of the series push to become carbon neutral by 2030. The plans have already successfully brought the Volkswagen Group into F1 through Audi, which will enter in 2026 as an engine supplier. Its sister brand Porsche remains interested in making it as F1 engine despite seeing its planned partnership with Red Bull fall through. And again, it's important to understand that Liberty embarked on a massive transformation of the sport when they came in 5 or 6 years ago. And a big part of that was one, hammering out a new Concord agreement in 2020 that went into effect in 2021 that completely changed the technical and the sporting regulations and the way that the money that the sport ingests is distributed amongst all of its relevant parties. A big change, of course, was 2022 with the
Mm-hmm.
introduction of a fundamentally new car in the cost cap. That's one big part of it. But the power unit in the cars, though now frozen, is really a legacy from the previous regime. Of course, you and I have been talking about the the V6 turbo hybrid power units since 2014. The power units in
Yep.
the car today are an iteration of what was introduced in 2014. So in 2026, as much as on paper, those power units are going to be similar, it's going to be, again, a very small displacement V6 engine with a huge turbocharger. The actual recipe for that power unit is going to be significantly simplified. Of course, the MGU-H is going to be removed. The MGU-K is going to be expanded. There's going to be synthetic fuels. But again, the reason that there's going to be major 2026 power unit regulation changes is they want to simplify that formula to make it more attractive to cooks that don't have a lot of experience in the kitchen. And that's a metaphor. But what I mean is they want to make it attractive to other manufacturers to build these power units, because the power units that were developed in 2024, as much as I love them and I will shed a tear when they're gone, were so overtly expensive to design and develop that nobody apart from the teams that were doing it from the jump. So of course we're talking about Renault and we're talking about Mercedes and Ferrari, etc. Nobody else was going to come and join in. And while Audi is coming, they're not going to be producing a power unit until that 2026 refresh. So again, it's just about contextualizing this transformation and this transformative period that Formula One is going through. So again, the 2022 cars themselves, the chassis were important, but the real package, the complete plan, won't be really rolled out until 2026.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's exciting to follow along and see where this is going to grow and develop over the years and months ahead. Cool, Hammy. Well, I think we're at the end of the outline for tonight. Anything else that kind of popped up in between? We've done emails, we've done not really breaking news, but the most recent news, and I'm still trying to collect myself after, like I said, a very exciting wild card weekend in the NFL. So I'm going to have to go and try and calm down a little bit here, or else I'm never going to be able to get to sleep tonight. I'm going to be a complete wreck in the morning when I have to get up and go to work. But anyways, I'm going to do your job before we shut the lights off here tonight. If you enjoy the podcast and you want to support us, by all means, the easiest way to do so is just to hop onto Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating review. It means the world to both myself and Mark, and we're very grateful for each and every one of them, and it really helps the show grow and exposes it to other people that are searching up for a new Formula One podcast to listen to. If you want to get in touch, by all means, the easiest way to get in touch with us is via Twitter at ScooteryF1Pod or via email at scooteryf1pod@gmail.com. Looks like Hammy's already shut off his mic and taken off his headset and is ready to bolt for the door. No, he hasn't. I'm just kidding. Hammy, do you want to say anything before we sign off? No, just got a big head shake and a big wave. So on behalf of myself and Mr. Mark Hamilton, thank you all very much for listening to the show tonight. We'll catch you guys in a couple of days. Enjoy your week, and we'll talk to you again really, really soon. Bye for now.